Hey, it's Craig. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Canadian History X early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Greetings and welcome to another episode of Canadian History X. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can. Just go to patreon.com/CanadaEHX. You can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month. You can also donate to the podcast by going to CanadaEHX.com and clicking Donate. Don't forget, I have two other podcasts out there, Pucks and Cups and From John to Justin, available on all podcast platforms. Today, I'm speaking with Loretta Todd. She's the director of Monkey Beach, which recently was released on Crave TV, and you can check it out if you have a subscription. It's been shown at various festivals, and it's getting a lot of buzz. Based off the book Monkey Beach, a lot of people have been really enjoying it, and I had the chance to talk with Loretta about it, about her career, and much more. So let's get right to it. How has the past year been dealing with the pandemic? How has it been overall for you?
The pandemic, of course, as a filmmaker is never good, but for all people, it's not good. I mean, it's just so tragic and sad. And, you know, so many friends and family members have got COVID. You know, you hear the stories on our First Nations where there's been so much, you know, in some cases there was lockdown, so that was really good. In other cases, there's been a lot of people who've become infected, especially recently. So it's been a very stressful time worrying about people and trying to keep safe. In the meantime, I'm also doing season 3 of Coyote Science, which is Indigenous children's series I do with APTN. So I've had to come up with a new strategy for filming that and keep all the people safe. So what I came up with this idea of these bubbles. Fortunately, I've worked with many Indigenous directors and cinematographers over the years in my children's series. So I have a good, group of people that I work with and trust. And many of them have kids. And in Coyote Science, we have kids, the questers, the main part of the series. So there, I was able to create these bubbles where those people are filming their kids in their bubble. And so they're directing and doing cinematography, in some cases also doing sound. So it hasn't been the most ideal. It's made life a little slower for production for sure, but I felt that was the best way so that we weren't bringing crews into Indigenous communities and putting, elders at risk.
Tell me a bit about Coyote Science. What is that?
Coyote Science is a series that I created about Indigenous science for kids about grade 4, 5 in that area. And it really celebrates Indigenous science. It's got lots of experimental, fun. You get to, do your own kind of experiments at home. We feature Indigenous scientists. We have hip hop. We featured Mob Bounce. In one episode about skateboarding. We have John Harrington, who's the first Indigenous astronaut to walk in space. He comes on every episode in a segment I call "Where in the World is John Harrington?" And he talks about usually ancient Indigenous science, but not exclusively, because he also talks about how they use VR in order to train to go to walk in space. So we also feature knowledge holders, Indigenous knowledge holders, elders who know a lot about Indigenous science, and these kids go on these quests. Also, we have an amazing Indigenous host named Isa White, and I don't know, it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and people really like it. It seems to kids feel, I always try to create things in which kids can learn without feeling like they're learning. It's like sort of experiential thing, and really, make them, not make them, but give them that opportunity to really understand that we as Indigenous people have always had science, that we are engineers, we are mathematicians, we are architects, all those things. We've always been those. So I like making that series.
What attracted you to making a movie based off the novel Monkey Beach?
There's a group of us who've been, back when we started out, back in the day, we've been trying to make feature films. That's what I was trying to do, was make feature films. And we brought a few forward to telefilm, and then, back in the day, and, there was always a good reception, but it never seemed to happen. But that's always been, my dream. Somewhere along the line, someone told me I should option Eden's book, Monkey Beach. And I said, why? And they said, because your filmmaking is like her writing. And I knew about the book, and it was a great success. It was a bestseller. So I was going to read it. I just hadn't had a chance. So I went out and bought it, and just like it came alive to me, just something that spoke to me. And I was fortunate that she optioned it, and it took me a long time. I guess I would say I was sort of ahead of the curve. I guess there just wasn't that kind of response there is now for Indigenous feature filmmaking. So there was, but I never gave up, and I never stopped working. I was always working on trying to make it happen, just trying to find different angles. And I went everywhere. I went to billionaires. I went to, I took many paths for sure.
What were some of the challenges, especially related to COVID and kind of getting it put together and ready for release?
Well, I made it in 2018, so COVID hadn't happened yet. The delay to getting it to screen in the fall of 2020 wasn't because of COVID. It was because of, just trying to make it the best film I could and make sure that there was, that things weren't just, that's good enough. I can never do that. I can never do that's good enough. I have to make it as amazing as I can with the resources I have. So that meant I had to go and raise more resources, and particularly for the VFX. Where COVID did help is that I had this very limited budget for VFX that even when I raised, additional money was still very modest, to say the least. But what happened was I was knocking on many VFX company doors, and some of them would get back to me and say, well, sorry, your budget isn't big enough, we're too busy. Many of them didn't get back to me at all. But there was a few smaller companies and said, gee, we'd really love to work with you, but this project's great, but we have limited staff and we're busy with contracts. And but then COVID hit, and all those VFX companies, things changed. So I went back to one of them in particular, and they said, yeah, well, we don't, our contracts are gone now, and we'd love to work with you. So that's what we did. So it's kind of it helped in a strange way.
And now you have some really great actors who are in this movie. What was it like working with them and having kind of such a great cast around you?
Well, as they say, casting and lighting to me is two really critical things. And so really, it was really critical for me to find a cast that was really going to create the kind of way the film, looks to the world. So we're these beautiful, epic people, and I wanted to portray that. I wanted to portray the fact that there's a tremendous skill level within the Indigenous community with respect to acting. People have been acting for many years, or even if they haven't been acting for many years, they've been very serious about acting. And so they put a lot of work into their craft. So it was really important for me to portray that, to embody that, to let the film really breathe with that. At the same time, the budget wasn't huge, so there were some roles that I had to cast just with people in the neighborhood up in Kitimat, people who weren't actors. So there was a kind of a combination of actors and non-actors in the film. But it was really wonderful working with all of them. I'd like to think that, what is it they say? Gladwell says, the 10,000 hours sort of, idea of mastering a craft. Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't added up the 10,000 hours, but I'm probably pretty close. So even if it's been in children's series and, the other things I've done over the years. So I'd like to think that my craft, my maturity, the fact that, at my heart, I have a kind of, what is it? I think that there's nothing wrong with being a sensitive person, empathetic, what's the word? Empathy, someone who has a lot of empathy. And as opposed to, you hear some directors where they treat the actors like puppets, or they're very, like stern, angry. You got to do this. This is my thing. And, and I mean, I don't know. But for me, the way was just be as prepared as I could, be as focused as I could, and give them the space and the safety to really go as deep as they needed to go to really embody those characters. So yeah, it was a great experience.
So throughout your career, you've spent a lot of time, like you said, the 10,000 hours, bringing Indigenous stories, Indigenous art, like you said, the Coyote Science, Monkey Beach. You've done a lot of work with the National Film Board. Why is it so important today to be bringing a lot of Indigenous uh, art stories and movies to the forefront?
Well, it's always been important. I don't think, I mean, unfortunately, we get into this kind of mindset that's so Canadian that, oh, the Indians are here now. Gee, finally they're ready to tell their stories. Well, we've been telling our stories all along. And, I'm not criticizing you for that question, because it's certainly sort of like that's the kind of narrative that goes on. I mean, we didn't stop telling stories. We've been telling stories, for since time immemorial, and will continue. And certainly when the newcomers arrived, we told stories about them as well as we continue to tell the stories of our own, lives. And even though there was, our ceremonies were outlawed and our languages were outlawed, people still found a way to tell stories. And, if you look back, I like to think that there's a guy named Freddie Alexi, who is from Port Simpson on the West Coast, who was sort of Mohawk and Shimshan. And he was doing lantern drawings, paintings back in, early turn of the 19th century, like the 20th century. And they were like two slides together so that they would create animation. And those were filmed, they were about, life in the longhouse that he had, lived with and grew up with, and he was fearing was no longer going to be. So he did these lantern things, which you could maybe say was the first Indigenous filmmaker. So, that's a long time ago. And, certainly we didn't have access to the cameras, but, a lot of Indigenous actors went to Hollywood, to be part of that, not just because they wanted to get into movies, but because they saw it as another avenue to tell stories, to have their presence there. So, I mean, I think we've been telling stories for a long, long time. I kind of take offense. I know recently it was in the paper about somebody said reclaiming our Indigenous stories. We don't need to reclaim, we already have them. So, but I think what has happened is, I mean, one of the critical things that we've been saying as Indigenous storytellers, filmmakers, and artists and writers for a long time, and I don't know, maybe I'm not supposed to speak for everybody, but I've heard this being said before, so I don't think I'm the only one saying it, is this idea that really our stories are at the center, need to be at the center of the Canadian narrative. That really there is no place else these stories can be. All these beautiful settlers and newcomers have come to Canada. They have their origin stories back in their own homelands, and they come to Canada and they find a way to integrate those into their narratives while they're here. Some it's easier than others because of ongoing colonialism and racism, but certainly there's no place else for these stories to go except here. So really our story should be at the center of the Canadian narrative. What is the origin story of Canada? So those are all things that I think are really critical. And I mean, just looking at the kind of, one of the reasons I also made Coyote Science, and I did another children's series as well, was our kids don't see themselves on screen. And if they do see themselves on screen, it's usually within this context of tragedy or trauma. So it was really important for me to, in those series, show kids being healthy and in good, healthy relationships with teachers and, role models, and, making good choices in their lives, and realizing that they had the capacity and the sovereignty to do that even in their young, life. So, and just, so I think that was one of the things that really motivated me, is this idea of, seeing ourselves on these screens, and all the screens, not just the TV or the film screen. Now there's so many screens now, and our young people and not so young people, because certainly one of the biggest stars of TikTok was that Indigenous man down in California with his Fleetwood Mac thing.
Right, yes.
I mean, talk about a storyteller. Really, I mean, it's just that one moment with that one move, I mean, how much did that say, and how that so motivated so many Indigenous youth and elders and, everything in between to get on TikTok.
Absolutely. Now, you've screened the movie at the Toronto International Film Festival, at the Vancouver International Film Festival. What has the response been to Monkey Beach overall?
Well, for the people, it's been amazing. I mean, in Vancouver especially, because I know so many of the people who went to see it. I just get so many messages, and people saying they love it. This is the second they saw it 2 or 3 times. People actually, despite COVID, would go see the film again because they were showing it here in Vancouver in the theater. It's very COVID safe. Mm-hmm. Up in Terrace, where it showed, which is the closest town to Kitimat, where we filmed, the village of Kitimat, they had 18 sold out houses for the screening. Now, each theater they have 2 theaters, and each theater is only 50 people per theater. But nonetheless, people were just, going. And so the people's response has been amazing because of the fact that it was so well, tended in Terrace. Apparently, the manager of the Prince Rupert Cineplex was hearing about these people traveling from Prince Rupert to Terrace to go see Monkey Beach, even though it's about an hour and a half, depending on how fast you drive, hour and 45 minutes, to Terrace, mm-hmm. Back. So basically a 3 and even longer hour trip to go see a film. And they were going to see it. So apparently the manager of Prince Rupert's Cineplex called up the head office in Toronto and said, look, there's this potential. So that kind of opened the door. And so Cineplex, showed it starting in Vancouver and then sort of rolling it out to other places in in BC, and then eventually Alberta, Saskatchewan, a little bit of Northern Ontario, and then Halifax. Of course, the rest of Quebec and Manitoba and Ontario were kind of off limits because of their closure of all the theaters. Mm-hmm. But while the theaters were still open, and while they were in certain areas, we were the #1 Canadian film for I think 4 or 5 weeks, mm-hmm. and we got into the top 10, and the only Canadian film in the top 10. So I feel very proud of that there was such a warm response, and people feel that the film is very hopeful. So I feel really good about it. And, people like you have been really, really, opening and very responsive. A lot of podcasts and bloggers and people have their own, systems. But the critics, I can't say, have been very kind. Mind you, just been one critic. Another one was kind of, indifferent, but the media has picked it up, and, really thankful to Nicola Pender, who's an amazing PR person, mm-hmm. and Lena Minifee, who's our social media person. I mean, they've done an amazing job to just get the word out and get the news out. And so I feel really, really good about that. I would like to have a dialogue about it because I feel that it has to have its own place. And given this sort of response by the people, there should be a good response, it doesn't have to be good reviews, but I mean, there should be more engagement around mm-hmm. it, by the media elite, but, I feel really good about the broadcasters, particularly Crave and Bell and APTN. They've really been very supportive of the film, and CBC too.
Mm-hmm. In regards to that, like you said, it's been pretty successful around the country. You were in the top 10, you were the top Canadian film. And now I believe on January 6th, it's coming to Crave. So are you excited for it to reach such a large audience across the country through the streaming service?
Oh, yeah. I mean, people have been waiting. They just say that because they didn't feel comfortable going to the theater, when the theaters were open. So there's just people have been waiting for this day. So I feel really excited about that. Yeah, so a lot of people have been saying they've been waiting for this so that they can see it, and then they can see it many times. And, so it's been really good response that way. I know we've had a few messages that, sometimes, our people, don't have Crave, because it costs extra.
Yeah.
And our people are still struggling with, income, mm-hmm. so that's just a reality for Indigenous people. So that that's something I still feel bad about, that it isn't going to be sort of like, generally available, at least for a while. But I think that there's, a lot of people have Crave. And so it's a really great opportunity. And the Crave people have been so responsive. They've been working really closely with the social media and PR team. And I actually caught it a couple of times on Crave, the trailer. And, it's sort of exciting to be alongside these other sort of like big production time. Then Monkey Beach trailer, my trailer comes on, was actually done by Cheyenne Coutineo, who's amazing, DJ and artist and editor, who works with me on Coyote Science. And so, her trailer editing sort of stands up against all these, big productions that probably spent a lot of money on their trailers and probably did it 20 times with focus group before they released it. So here's, our one, and it sort of stands and holds its own against that. So yeah, I'm excited. And also we'll get into the households of non-Indigenous people as well. And I think that's really important because it does, it's kind of a different portrayal. I mean, I think, again, it's important that we deal with our trauma, deal with intergenerational trauma and all the kind of struggles we've had as Indigenous people. But, even though Monkey Beach deals with trauma and deals with intergenerational trauma, even though it's dealing with all those things, I always meant it to be a hopeful film. I always meant it to be a film that would make people feel empowered, especially Indigenous women. And so I really think that will be sort of different for non-Indigenous people to see in terms of Indigenous film. And just to see the amazing performances, how beautiful the cinematography is, and how precious that land, that territory is, the Haisla territory. And I have a big shout out to the Haisla people and the Haisla Nation for their support of making Monkey Beach up in Kitimat. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm glad it's being brought to more households in Canada, and I hope people feel as good about it as the people who've already gone to see it.
One question I like to ask over the past year when I've talked to singers and authors and musicians and actors, directors, is has COVID shown the importance of arts in our life with having to be home for so long and having access to streaming services or books or music? Is it really shown us, how much we do need various types of art in our life?
Well, I think it's actually made also a bit of a switch to make people realize that they are artists, that they are storytellers, that, collectively we are creative. Human beings are meant to be creative, that we're meant to live our life as art. I mean, there's so many, that was really the intention of Indigenous philosophy, if you like. I made a film back in the day called Hands of History, and the late Reed Jensen, who was really one of the most amazing, people I've ever known. And she was certainly a mentor to me. She, in that film, she talks about how there was no word for art in her language, but pretty well in most Indigenous languages, there was no word for art. And yet we practice art every day. And this idea that, we as human beings, that's, what we excel at, is being creative. And I think that's one thing that COVID has sort of reminded people, that they can tell stories, that they can create art, that it's not just this rarefied few elite that get to do it, that, we're all capable. And yet at the same time, it also, celebrates those people who have been making a living as artists and, doing their best. I think it's been a real struggle for artists, filmmakers, musicians, especially DJs. Those people have really had to kind of, their whole life has changed because of COVID. So, my heart goes out to them, because I know it hasn't been easy, I'm sure, financially for them. But, I've taken in a lot of those, Facebook or Eventbrite or, all those other kinds of social media, Twitch and so on, events online. And even just to have them sort of in the background, as I'm doing work, it's still really important. And I know that I'm kind of supporting those people. Even if I'm one like, or one heart, I'm still somebody that's there, that's listening. Certainly, the there's a kind of I know there's been a movement that's kind of come about guaranteed annual income for artists, as a way of sort of maneuvering around these kinds of things when there is no venues anymore. Like, what do you do? Like, I also created a thing called the IM4 Lab, which is a immersive technology lab. We've been running for a couple of years. And we had to shut everything down, and so we had to move everything online. And it was really a great experience, because I think we were able to we were planning a big conference at the end of March, this last March, and so that all had to go online. And so as much as, the IM4 practices this idea of being, inclusive, anybody can come and learn, anybody can come and do, productions with us if they're interested in immersive technology, AR and VR, so on. And but that conference would have still been, limited. But the fact that we were able to move online sort of gave, access to everybody, to hear those brilliant, Indigenous VR and AR artists, like Casey Corsican and, others who are just amazing. And so that, it's been one of those sort of side effects, the good side effects, if you like, of COVID.
In regards to the film, by the time this comes out, it'll been out for a couple days. So with all the people being able to watch it on Crave, what do you hope that once they've watched the movie, what do they get from it? What do you hope they kind of learn from the film or get out of watching the film?
Well, I've talked about this in other interviews, this idea of medicine, that we all have medicine within us. And that medicine is really, when I say that, I mean something, a gift, something that can bring goodness to humanity, to ourselves, to our families, to our communities. In the Cree way, we talk about something called the good life, and that's sort of what we strive for. And it's not like two fancy cars, and it's not. That's not what it's meant. What it means is that we're living a good life. Like we're respectful and of others, and respectful of all living beings around us, and we take our responsibilities as Niwa well. And I think about what is how are we in service people and to all our relations. So I think that's something that. So medicine, I tried to put at the core. I like to think, but I saw Lisa's journey in the film as a journey of her coming to her medicine, and that embracing that medicine is critical to her survival as an Indigenous woman. And I really that was one of the messages I really wanted at the end, is that Indigenous woman, because we still we're in many ways so vulnerable, we're so not valued in a colonial world, and so by embracing our medicine, it's sort of a proclamation to the world, but also we're all capable of that, the Indigenous community, all of us, but the non-Indigenous community too. Like, what is your gift? What is that sort of superpower you have within you to make a better world? And so even though we're talking about this very specific story of this very specific person in this very specific place, I'd like to think that this idea of embracing your medicine is one that's really critical for these times. And I'm hoping that people get that. But even if they just kind of get swept away by the beauty of the performances and the cast and location and the cinematography and the excellence of the directing, and the writing, and because the writing wasn't easy. We had to, I worked with two writers, and they really, you take this amazing book with all these layers and all these stories, and try to condense it down to 90 minutes. And that was one of the biggest struggles, with one of the reasons it took a long time, because Telefilm keeps saying, "Oh, the script's too long, Loretta," or it's not quite there yet. So so those things, so hopefully they'll see just the sheer, what's the artistry of it. If they just can react to that, then I think I'll be very happy too.
And looking into 2021, we've just started the year. What do you have coming up? What new projects are you starting now that Monkey Beach is kind of out there now?
Well, Monkey Beach has been, the last 2 years has been a very grueling time for many reasons, but also a very good time, also for many reasons. So I'm still working on Coyote Science 3. So we're still, in production with that because, again, COVID's making it go slower. So I have to kind of be on top of that soon because and then also the IM4 lab continues. We're hoping to develop a virtual production studio because, we feel virtual production is sort of a way to go that sort of, in one way, it's also a counter to COVID in terms of production, but it also brings lots of different elements into production, which I find quite exciting and interesting. And so we're trying to develop that at the IM4 lab. I have an animated series that I'm trying to develop. I have many feature films that are kind of been sitting there, like ones I brought around in the past. Maybe one in particular, set in Paris. That it's a big budget because it's a period piece. So who knows? I was told when I first wrote that script and took it to producer, oh, we'll never get this made, Loretta, because the budget's too big. No one's going to give you that kind of money. So, but I made Monkey Beach, so who never, anything's possible. But I have other things. I have other projects in the works, so we'll see how they all come to be. And I'm also available for work. I mean, and one of the reasons I became a producer is because, again, being ahead of my time, knocking on doors saying, hey, I can direct, didn't lead to work, but I'm now in the DGC, so maybe we'll lead to some work.
Absolutely. Sounds like a busy year. And then just my last question, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to learn about Monkey Beach, if there's any social media that you're out on, how can people follow you or just learn more about what you do?
I've been really busy, so I haven't really been having my own social media beyond, Facebook, but Monkey Beach is on Facebook, and we're trying to get on Instagram. We had an account, but somehow we weren't able to get access to it. So we're probably starting a new Instagram account. We would welcome people's, their own, photos of them watching Monkey Beach. Their own. At one point I thought it'd be cool to show, people, where they were reading the book even. But and myself, so I'm once I kind of get going again, or not get going again because I have been working through the holidays. I'm probably going to be on Instagram, but we have a website also, Monkey Beach Movie, I think it's called, and we have a really active Facebook page, so people can message me there for sure, and that's also called Monkey Beach Movie or Monkey Beach Film. I can't remember which. But it's easy to find. There's only other one on Monkey Beach. There's an actual Monkey Beach somewhere in Thailand, I think. And so if you Google sometimes, that Monkey Beach comes up. But this, it doesn't take too long to usually find it.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Loretta Todd, and if you did, please leave a rating and review. If you'd like to reach me, you can. Just email craig@canadaehx.com. You can also visit my website where you'll find all my podcast episodes, as well as hundreds of articles on Canada's history. Just go to canadaehx.com. And again, you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month. Just go to patreon.com/canadaehx, just like all of these wonderful patrons have. And I apologize if I mispronounce any names. Gary Dolovich, Nick Zinri, Pamela Elder, Shannon Marshall, Clinton Martinez, Dimitri Shove, Aaron O'Hara Myers, Robert Dunseith, Todd Casey, Catherine Roy, Luke S., Vic Hedges, JP Bear, Jason Hall, Phil Maynard, Spencer M., and Iris Gray. You can also find me on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/CanadianHistoryX. And I'm on Twitter. Just go to Craig Baird, CraigBaird. I'm also on Instagram, and you just have to look for Bairdo37. Thanks. We'll see you again next time.